Welcome in to the DNVR Broncos podcast. I'm your host, Zac Stevens, joined by my main man, Andrew Mason, on this special edition of the podcast. And Mace, we're going live today to talk about the huge expected and unexpected news with Peyton Manning and John Lynch being into the Hall of Fame. Mace, how are you doing? We found out this news about 12 hours ago.
I'm feeling great. I've got my Hall of Fame jersey on, of course, at Leroy Selman, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. John Lynch for 4 of his seasons in Tampa Bay before he eventually came to Denver, wore this beautiful Florida orange jersey with the number 47 on it. But
another reason to be wearing that jersey today, Mace.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's a big day for the Bucs, and John Lynch getting in made a big weekend for the Bucs as well, because he's more known for what he did in Tampa Bay. But as we'll discuss, John Lynch may not be a Hall of Famer without the time that he had in Denver to add to that resume that he had established. And then, of course, Peyton Manning. When he got to Denver, he was a Hall of Famer, clearly, but then he took himself to another level, literally stacking arguably the greatest individual season a quarterback has ever had, another Super Bowl win, another 2 AFC titles onto his burgeoning resume. And, they're late career Broncos, but they're still Broncos who accomplished a heck of a lot. 4 years is kind of the standard, I think, for really claiming a guy for the Ring of Fame, for the Hall of Fame, things like that. So it's cool to see the Broncos get more representation. And as I wrote last night, Zach, it's been a great few years for the Broncos, getting 5 players and Pat Bowlen into the Hall of Fame since 2017. No team has got more people into the Hall of Fame in that span. I know there are others we need to work on, Randy Gradishar, but the Broncos, they're getting their due now from Canton, and it's richly deserved, and it's good to see that continue this weekend.
Yes, they are, and just as it should be, Mace. And what a weekend. The reason we did this live pod this morning was because we got to talk to Peyton Manning and John Lynch this morning, just fresh off of those press conferences. And Mace, you talk about how John Lynch needed his time in Denver to become a Hall of Famer. You're absolutely right. 4 years in Denver, 4 Pro Bowls, that really helped push him through. Of course, he wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer. He had to wait. He had to wait in the hotel room year after year after year and not get that knock. And then he gets the knock when he's celebrating in a little reunion with his family in San Diego. He gets the knock from David Baker a couple of weeks ago. And then, of course, Peyton Manning didn't get a knock from David Baker. Instead, they sent every single coach that has coached Peyton out to Denver to surprise him for it. Both awesome moments.
Not all of them. John Fox wasn't there in person, although he took part virtually. And Jim Mora, his first head coach in Indianapolis, wasn't there. But you had Philip Fulmer from the University of Tennessee, David Cutcliffe, who was offensive coordinator at UT. And you could kind of say was Peyton Manning's coach in the off seasons over the course of his career. All those times he went back to Duke University where Cutcliffe was the head coach. And then you had Tony Dungy, a Hall of Famer himself, Jim Caldwell, who really should be somebody's head coach right now, and I wish he was. And then finally, Gary Kubiak. And it was fun to see that last night when they showed it on the NFL Honor Special, because Peyton clearly means a lot to him, but you can hear kind of the emotion in Gary Kubiak's voice when he talks about him. And Kubiak had a really different experience with Peyton Manning than those other coaches, because that season, that was not Peyton Manning at his best. That was it was an offense that they were trying to kind of make work, and had it really operate in fits and starts. And of course, Peyton got hurt. But when the chips were down, Peyton delivered. And it's funny that there's such a gratitude from Gary Kubiak to Peyton Manning, but there's also a gratitude from Peyton to Kubiak as well. And when Kubiak was talking, I flashed back to a lot of moments from that season, and it was really cool to see. They couldn't have done that better for Peyton Manning than to have the coaches come back and salute him.
No, they certainly couldn't have. It was a very, very cool moment. Great job by the Broncos to set that up. And Mace, it was really, really cool through all of the videos and tributes last night and talking to Peyton today, just how much of the conversation the Broncos are in his career, because he was only here for 4 years. He was in Indianapolis for way longer than that. And it really feels like it's 50-50. If not, honestly, it feels like it's like 70 Broncos, 30% Colts. So that just another awesome remembering of that. And of course, 5 years ago today, Mace, was Peyton Manning's last day, or last game with the Broncos when they won Super Bowl 50. This is the 5-year anniversary of that. So really, I mean, just a trip down memory lane is very cool. And of course, John Lynch was with the Broncos in an AFC championship game, the closest that they ever got to winning a Super Bowl in between the John Elway and the Peyton Manning eras, was with John Lynch there too. And so I said we said how John Lynch had to have his time with the Broncos to be a Hall of Famer. Mace, there's an argument to be made that Peyton Manning was a Hall of Famer based off just his 4 years with the Broncos, 2 Super Bowl appearances, a Super Bowl championship, and then the best season a quarterback has ever had in 2013. Of course, he also had a pretty darn good season in 2012, in 2014 as well. And then the 1 year he doesn't have a good season, he wins a Super Bowl.
Yeah, at that point, by the end, it was Peyton's mind that was willing him, that was making his success possible. The ability to make pre-snap checks and read what a defense was doing. The body was betraying him, but the mind was still there. The mind was there to get the Broncos in the right matchup for those 2 touchdown passes he threw against New England in the AFC Championship game. And I mean, he wrung every bit out of himself, out of his body that he possibly could. I mean, he gave everything. There was nothing left in the tank when he walked away. I know there are some Broncos fans that like to think, what if he would have come back? Physically, it's sad the body was betraying him. He didn't have the career longevity of a Tom Brady, and it's kind of sad, kind of a shame. I mean, if Peyton Manning had Tom Brady's longevity, he could have gone for another few years. But what we got in Denver was still amazing. It was still special. I feel very fortunate, very blessed to have been at every game and seen every throw that Peyton Manning made in those 4 years. Hopefully I'll get to cover something like that again. We'll see. But it was remarkable. It was special. It was fun. And I'll say this. I don't think everybody appreciated it at the time. I think now, though, people really do appreciate what Peyton Manning brought here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mace. And want to give a shout out to everyone listening to us live right now. If you're watching on Periscope, we'd like you to check out our YouTube page. The quality comes in a little better, so check out the YouTube link. We'd really appreciate that. And then, of course, like, subscribe, and sign up for those alerts so you know every time we go live, especially if it's something like this, a little special live pod for you. So thank you for checking out YouTube. And Mace, today, I wore this Hawaiian shirt as I typically do, but I specifically wore it today, or I should call it an Aloha shirt, pardon me. But I specifically wore it today because, Mace, we were talking to John and Peyton just a couple minutes ago, and they really became close before they had the bond of the Broncos. They became close when they were in Pro Bowls together, of course, both going to many, many Pro Bowls, and they would just sit together for hours on end talking football and drinking Mai Tais out in Hawaii. So I just thought this was a perfect shirt for the occasion.
And billing whoever was the unwitting rookie or young player was there. They joked about having a lot of Mai Tais at the hotel bar and sticking Brian Moorman of the Buffalo Bills at the time with the bill. I mean, that's the sort of young player / rookie hazing that goes on at the Pro Bowl every year, especially when it was in Honolulu. And it's. And Peyton, it was funny. Peyton was really getting wistful talking about the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, he was. Man, it seemed like the Pro Bowl died. It seemed like this was the Pro Bowl's funeral today.
Yeah, he talked about how just it isn't the same since they moved it to the week before the Super Bowl rather than the week after. It's lost some of its juice. The thing that he probably could have said as well, but didn't, is that it has lost some of its unique appeal to guys because it's no longer in Honolulu. that now it's been in Orlando, it was in Phoenix, it was in Miami once, it's going to be in Las Vegas, but Las Vegas got snow 2 weeks back. I mean, there's something really special about it being on islands like that. And after the season, it felt like a true reward that you had a great season, and here's this Hawaiian vacation with a lot of the best of your sport. And you kind of, I covered a Pro Bowl out in Honolulu once, and you can see why that those bonds of fellowship and comradeship would form in that environment, because you're competitive against these guys over the course of the year, and then you get out there, you're on the same team with half of them, you're getting to know them as people, you're getting to know them as teammates, and I think there's a greater appreciation. And the funny thing with John Lynch is that he's talked in the past about how it was some of his times going to the Pro Bowl, getting to know people on the Broncos, but also getting to know Pat Bowlen as well, because Pat Bowlen had a place out in Hawaii and spent a lot of time there that were kind of the embryonic stages of him eventually becoming a Bronco. So you can't really tell the story of Peyton Manning, John Lynch's Broncos without mentioning a little bit of those trips in Hawaii and how they bonded. Oh, by the way, like they mentioned today, the two of John Lynch, Peyton Manning, and Eli Manning were on a golf trip. And the cool thing about that is they were required for a couple of weeks to keep the secret that they were going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. If John Lynch, like you mentioned earlier, found out the day before he was headed to Mobile for the Senior Bowl, and Peyton Manning was in Denver, and they kind of simulated him doing an on-camera thing when he found out, but they had to keep quiet, so they only kind of told some of their close relatives, and of course Eli Manning, close relative of Peyton Manning. So as they were saying during the press conference today, Eli, Peyton, and John, they were sitting there on their golf retreat, and they were drinking champagne, and nobody knew why they were drinking champagne.
Man, something should have tipped people off when they're saying, why on the golf course are they drinking champagne right now? That's not the typical drink of choice on the golf course.
Hey, what can you say? Maybe they just thought they were only celebrating Peyton, because everybody knew Peyton was going to the Hall of Fame. That was a slam dunk. I mean, the story and the surprise that you mentioned earlier, Zach, is John Lynch. And maybe it's just a surprise because he'd gone through this 7 times before, and you get to a point where you start worrying, is this guy just a perennial finalist who never gets in? I mean, it happened to Joe Jacoby of Washington, the great tackle for the Hogs back in the day. It happened to Jerry Kramer of the Green Bay Packers, who finally got in via the seniors committee. Sometimes you have these guys that are just finalists year after year after year after year, and they can't push the boulder over. But the thing with John Lynch, and we talk about how he burnished that resume, there was one, and also about Pro Bowls, like we're mentioning, there's one big line on John Lynch's resume that was kind of hard to deny, especially at safety, where it's tougher to quantify the accomplishments. And that is 9 Pro Bowls. No defensive back with at least 9 Pro Bowls is not in the Hall of Fame until yesterday. The only one who wasn't in was John Lynch. And so that was something that needed to be corrected. But he got to 9 by getting 4 Pro Bowls in 4 seasons with the Broncos, until Aqib Talib, the only Bronco to play at least 4 seasons and go to the Pro Bowl every time. You can debate whether that 07 one was deserved, but 04 to 06, he transformed himself into a little more of a box safety than he had been in Tampa Bay, and was still a very physical presence, and at times a dominant presence on that secondary with Champ Bailey. And so that's why I say, he had to wait for a while, but I don't think he's a Hall of Famer right now unless you talk about the Denver accomplishments with it. It pushed him over the top.
Oh, without a doubt, Mace. And Peyton has been Peyton these past 12 hours, cool, calm, collected. The quarterback, I mean, he was even driving and being the quarterback of the press conference today. He's Peyton Manning. And also, he knew this was coming. This was no surprise to him. Seeing him be a little surprised about how he found out the news with, of course, his coaches walking out. It looked like he was recording an ad at Empower Field at Mile High, and then all of his coaches walk out behind him, and then they all say some kind words about him. And then he turns around and David Baker's right there and he finds out the news. His kids are there jumping into his arms. That was really cool. That was the only surprise to Peyton, though. Mace, with John Lynch, he was very surprised. And you can tell these past 12 hours for him and these past 2 weeks when he found out have been extremely meaningful and emotional. And that has been so cool to see. And Peyton, of course, first ballot Hall of Fame. It's awesome. And he'll always have the first ballot Hall of Famer with him. And it's awesome now that the Broncos now have 2 first ballot Hall of Fame quarterbacks in their organization. But for John, it's so cool to see these guys that have to go through the process. And when they finally make it, John said today and last night, he said, this is something that I always kind of wanted to play down, said it wasn't that important to me. But man, I'm not going to lie. This is so important to me. It's so cool. And it's living this reality that he never thought was going to happen potentially.
One thing I've learned talking to Hall of Famers and guys who are close to it is that you try to downplay it publicly, but privately, what you feel in your heart, what you feel in your gut, it really does take a toll. I mean, Steve Atwater, he put on a brave face in the years that he didn't get on, but I know that he was a little bit crushed, even though I remember telling him, hey, you're getting closer now. You're in the last 10, Steve. You're right there. You're knocking at the door. But he you could tell that it was wearing on him a bit. I know it has worn for a long time on Randy Gradishar, who finally got in the room as a finalist in 08, was not selected, and keeps coming close and keeps being in the selection process for the seniors. The seniors committee, but hasn't gotten in. I still feel it was an incredible snub for Randy that he was not on that big seniors class that was going to go in last year and could go in next year. I'm hoping that now that we've got some numbers other than tackles, they refer to it as the 2010-7 club. That's 20 interceptions, 10 plus fumble recoveries, 7 Pro Bowl appearances. He is the only linebacker with those stat lines who is not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I'm hoping sometimes you need a number or a set of numbers to really quantify it and change it in the eyes of the voters. And I'm hoping that's going to push Randy Gradishar over the top. But man, it eats at these guys when they don't get in, and not knowing when that knock on the door is going to come. And you could see the kind of the joy in John Lynch's eyes when he realized what was going on. We recall the joy for Steve Atwater and his family when David Baker knocked on the door back in 2020 in Miami to tell him he was part of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So, yeah, I'm hoping that Randy Gradishar gets to experience that as well, because he's been dealing with this for a long time, and man, it's deserved. But yeah, like you said, it really does. It really does matter to them. You can explain it away. You can go on the record and say, oh, I'm at peace with it. But deep down, we know better.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And Mace, that's the one glaring miss that the Hall of Fame has right now is Randy Gradishar for the Broncos right now. But it's good that they're correcting their mistakes. John Lynch and, of course, Champ Bailey, a first ballot Hall of Famer, Terrell Davis. They're getting the representation. Pat Bowlen, of course, these past few years, like you said, 6 people in the Hall of Fame in the past 5 years is the most in the NFL. And Mace, this streak's going to stay alive one more year with DeMarcus Ware, almost certainly going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer next year. And I know,
but he's a 3-year guy. I know.
But he won a Super Bowl with them. He helped groom Von Miller, and it'll be fun to attach the Broncos name. I think we'll probably get a feeling there, Mace, that that's more of a 30% Broncos, 70% Cowboys, whereas really with Peyton, it felt like the opposite, 70% Broncos, 30 Colts.
I think it feels that way here, but stepping back and saying, I'll say it's still more Colts, but I'd say it's about 60-40 or 55-45. One thing that has helped the Broncos cause is Peyton staying in Denver and being connected to Denver. Although you saw Brandon Stokely's picture, it was the Colts jet, that 727 that Jim Irsay has that is tripped out, and we saw the picture of the interior. It's gorgeous. It was Jim Irsay's plane that came out from Indianapolis and shuttled Peyton Manning down to Tampa to be honored at the Super Bowl. So I think there's there's still the connections there, even though I think he feels very strongly about his connection with the Broncos. But also, you have to look at 14 years with Indianapolis and 4 seasons with Denver. So he's still a bit more of a Colt, but it's not an either or. I think there was some Buccaneer fan who was tweeting at me last night talking about, oh, you can't really claim John Lynch. You know what? You can share. Everybody can share these honors. When Gary Zimmerman went in, it's okay for the Broncos and the Vikings to share Gary Zimmerman. It's okay for the Broncos and Bucks to share John Lynch. Did he play more in Tampa? Yes, but he's got his name on the facade in Tampa. He's got his name on the facade in Denver. In Indianapolis, they've got a statue of Peyton outside. There's going to be a pillar with the face of Peyton Manning on the outside of the stadium here in Denver. What I'd like to see the Broncos do next is take Peyton Manning's name off of that banner that has Frank Tripucka's name and give Peyton his own banner, and also give Champ Bailey his own banner, and say that the standard going forward is that you made the Hall of Fame in large part because of your accomplishments as a Bronco, and you're a first ballot Hall of Famer, and that's what gets your jersey retired. That should be the standard.
Yep, it absolutely should be the first ballot Hall of Famer, Mace. And yeah, I do agree in that part. You can throw in that you had to be a major part. So DeMarcus Ware, you would say no then because of the only 3 years. He wouldn't get his number retired, would he?
He wouldn't get his number retired, although I think it's an interesting conversation because it was Pat Bowlen who in 1984 put forth the 4-year rule on Broncos Ring of Famers that you have to be with the Broncos for 4 seasons. And I am willing to count his year as a part-time coach just to say, you got the 4 years, DeMarcus, because I do think DeMarcus Ware should be in the Ring of Fame.
There you go. There's a loophole, Mace. I love you finding that, even though that was the weirdest little coaching gig that he had.
Yeah, I mean, he was on Dancing with the Stars at the time. But I look back at the Super Bowl 50 season, and especially in the playoffs, when DeMarcus Ware, in terms of generating pressures and generating quarterback hits, was as effective as Von Miller was.
Yeah.
And I can't separate that out and say, okay, you didn't do enough. It's, Brian Dawkins, unfortunately for him, he was with the Broncos at a bad time in their history. He didn't really have that sort of success. DeMarcus Ware did, and it was one of those guys, really along with Peyton Manning. They were the two kingpins of that locker room in those days. It was Peyton on the offensive side, DeMarcus Ware on the defensive side. They dropped to 9-7 without Peyton Manning, and I don't think it's coincidence, Zach, that the Broncos have not had a winning season since DeMarcus Ware retired, because then you were without both of those leaders. And while others have shown leadership qualities in terms of being the unquestioned leader of the team, neither Peyton nor DeMarcus Ware has been replaced.
Yeah, and Mace, it is so prevalent when you talk to Peyton, like we just did earlier this morning, just how much of an impact one guy truly can have within an organization. Just last week, Aqib Talib told us, there hasn't been another sheriff to walk through the building. That's why the Broncos haven't made the playoffs since Peyton left. It's because of the quarterback. That guy is just so important, and you could tell with Peyton. Just being around him, anytime he's around, you can tell that, boy, he just doesn't just have the entire room. He has the entire organization in check. And man, so cool for Peyton and John to go in. Yeah. Especially going together, being friends, and then also with the Broncos, both being here for 4 years and both having a key role in the organization in those 4 years.
Yeah, it meant so much to both of them, clearly, and I'm glad that they had them both speaking at the same time, because they were kind of bouncing stuff off of each other, like the two old buddies that they are. And although it was funny though that Peyton was giving John Lynch a lot of grief about not knowing what was going on when his family had a family reunion down in San Diego, which is where David Baker told him. And Peyton's like, yeah, I didn't go to Stanford. I'm just a Tennessee guy, but I wouldn't know what was going on.
Said he was disappointed in Stanford education for not prepping him for that. Even a Tennessee grad would be able to figure that out.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm wearing the Tennessee orange right now. You know what?
Hey, that looks good on you.
Think about that with Peyton. I mean, because this light orange is really the UT shade. I mean, all that's missing is a little checkerboard in the background, right? I mean,
yeah.
So it's all about the orange. It's about the orange that John Lynch wore in Tampa Bay, and then wore for a few spot games. Actually, I think, you know what? I think he only wore the orange jersey once with the Broncos, if I'm not mistaken. He wore it for, I want to say it was the Raiders game on Sunday night in 2004 that unfortunately the Broncos lost, and that we didn't see the orange again. So
only you would know how many games a specific player played in a specific color.
Oh man, I'm a nerd, aren't I?
No, you're smart. You're showing off that Stanford education, Mace.
That's not Stanford. That's Mizzou in South Florida, baby.
Hey, there we go. There we
Tigers,
go.
go Bulls.
And Mace, I know we'll all be saying,
maybe Drew Lock will show off that Mizzou education sometime and flourish. We'll surely talk about this week, but maybe Drew Lock is going to be the only quarterback of the bottom 5 in passer rating that's going to be given another chance with his current team this year, because they're all being traded or let go, and the Broncos might run it back with Drew Lock, and maybe Drew can show off some of those Mizzou skills, since they'll have the same offensive coordinator for the first time since he was at Mizzou.
Yep, exactly. You're 100% right. And Mace, but one of the things that John and Peyton both said, which ties to what you were saying, was they both didn't want to play for the Broncos, in terms of they wanted to stay with their first organization their entire career. Mm-hmm. John wanted to stay with the Bucs. Peyton wanted to stay with the Colts. But injuries both made it so they had to move on and find another destination. And both of them essentially said the Broncos were just the best possible place that they could have landed, not just because of success that they had with the team, but it was a fantastic city to be in. Obviously, Peyton still lives here. John said he was going to live here his whole life until plans changed. And a quick funny story about that, when Peyton was looking at, should I go to the Tennessee Titans? Should I come to the Denver Broncos? One of the people he talked to was John Lynch, and John still lived in Denver at the time, said, Peyton, I love Denver. I am never leaving Denver. That's how much me and my family likes it. So Peyton really took that to heart and remembered it. 2 years after that, John shipped out to San Diego, and Peyton holds that over his head to this day still. But those two having the connection to Denver and coming to Denver and finishing their careers, it's really cool hearing them talk about it, just about how it was the best place for them. And obviously, when you leave with the Super Bowl in your hand, Mace, that's definitely the right choice.
Well, you had Peyton Manning leaving with a Super Bowl. John Elway left with a Super Bowl. I don't think Tom Brady is going to join that club today, because I don't think he's going to retire if the Bucs win. I think he's going to run it back for another year. But hey, there's something to the notion that you come to Denver to end your career in the perfect fashion. And even though things have changed around the organization, of course, sadly, because Pat Bowlen has passed away and is no longer in charge of things, obviously. And Pat Bowlen, Peyton Manning mentioned him, and John Lynch mentioned him. And Lynch in particular has talked about how he would run to Pat Bowlen not only in Hawaii, but sometimes on the ski slopes. But one of the few bad things about being a Bronco is that when John Lynch signed with the Broncos, he couldn't ski anymore. It's the old Keith Karts clause in the contract. Keith Karts was a center for the Broncos in the early 1990s, and he got injured during a charity skiing event organized by the team, and that was pretty much the end of his career. And so that's why you don't see Broncos players out on the slopes anymore. It's forbidden contract wise. It's a standard in contracts here.
Yeah, exactly. That you don't want to see players on the slopes until after they are retired. And Peyton Manning may have been. Oh wow, my cat is joining us
you got
right
a visitor.
now.
Hi.
That's probably time to wrap up now.
It's a black cat. Should I take that as a bad omen for my Bucks in this game?
Boy, maybe it's a bad omen for the Chiefs there, Mace.
Hope so.
And Peyton Manning kind of put a precedent on this of even if you're the greatest ever, you may not finish your career with that same team that you started the career with. And that, Mace, we're seeing in the NFL right now. Now, not greats, but first-round picks are moving on left and right now, and that's something that we're going to talk about, specifically at that quarterback position, Mace, the rest of this week, to try to find out what the Broncos quarterback situation is going to be.
Yeah, and if it's Drew Lock as the guy, you hope he can figure for this season. You hope he can figure it out and be the guy for the long term. And it's funny though, like you talk about what Aqib mentioned about what's kind of been missing. You haven't had that sheriff, and I don't know that the Broncos would pay the price necessary, but Deshaun Watson's a sheriff in terms of his presence within organization and what he means. I know you may say, "Oh, they just went 4-12 despite Deshaun Watson." I remember the 2001 season, Peyton Manning's fourth in the league. Deshaun Watson just had his fourth season, by the way. The Colts went a very disappointing, despondent 6-10. Changed coaches and then quickly rebounded with Tony Dungy in 2002 and went to the playoffs and started a very long run of success. Kind of the point being that even great quarterbacks from a team success perspective will have some years early on or at various points where the team just isn't great. I mean, Drew Brees went through 3 straight 7-9 seasons with the Saints. It doesn't, just because you have a great quarterback doesn't mean you're always going to be contending, but it certainly raises your floor a little bit.
It certainly does, Mace. So that's something we're going to be covering. And Mace, the cats are on the loose in my house right now. It's probably a time to sign off, Mace.
Well, I think we should get one more question in, though. We got one comment from Henry Zimenoff who says, now that the list keeps growing, who are the next Broncos players to get into Canton? We talked about Randy Gradishar earlier, but I think it's not just players, but we could be talking about a former Broncos coach here at some point.
Oh, as we should be. Mike Shanahan should be in. Two-time Super Bowl champ. He absolutely should be in.
Yeah, and the thing with Shanahan's case, it has been helped very much in the last 12 months. Jimmy Johnson, 2 Super Bowls. He's a Hall of Famer. He's part of that Centennial class. Bill Cowher, only 1 Super Bowl win, longtime coach of the Steelers. He's in the Hall of Fame. Tom Flores, another 2-time Super Bowl winner, is part of this 2021 class. So now you kind of look at it and say, all right, there's a standard that's being set. The next ones in terms of 2-time Super Bowl winners would be Mike Shanahan, George Seifert, Tom Coughlin. I think there's a case for all 3 of those to get in. Seifert, it's interesting. He's being weighed down by kind of inheriting Bill Walsh's team and keeping it going. And he's also weighted down by having one really bad season in Carolina to close his career. His last year head coach, the Panthers, went 1-15. And I think Mike is being held down a bit by the end of his Washington tenure as well, because after what I think was Mike's best coaching job in 2012 when they went 10-6, and ask Tyler Columbus, who was on that Washington team, about the kind of coaching job that Mike Shanahan did that year, and he will go on he'll give you a very long response and talk for a while about what Mike did to make that work. That 3-13 season in Washington the next year is kind of hurting his cause. But you step back now, Tom Flores had some bad seasons in Seattle as a head coach, and he's in the Hall of Fame. So the template is out there. You can end your career poorly, have 2 Super Bowl wins, and be in the Hall. So I think it's just a matter of time for Mike Shanahan, but I hope it's sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We have Breck Drew chiming in saying in terms of players, Von Miller probably the next player, if not Gradishar.
I'd say hopefully Gradishar. If we're counting DeMarcus Ware, he comes right after that. And then Aqib Talib is going to have a really good case for the Hall of Fame. Even though the career numbers may not kind of match up, he could be kind of in the Hall of Fame for the same reason that someone like a Ty Law, for example, is in the Hall of Fame, being part of a great team, a great defense. There's going to be kind of like we see with the Bucks with Lynch and Derek Brooks, Warren Sapp. there's going to be momentum for guys who were on that defense in the mid-2010s, the no-fly zone era for the Broncos. That's going to help Aqib Talib's cause tremendously. I think it'll be the cherry on the sundae for DeMarcus Ware. And someday, if Chris Harris Jr. can have a few more good seasons here, might help his cause as well to get the Hall of Fame. But I think if we're going in order for players, I do think Gradishar gets in the next couple of years. There's momentum there. I think I'd like to see Carl Mecklenburg get some traction as well. But realistically, we're talking about Gradishar, DeMarcus Ware, and then Aqib, and then Von Miller.
Yeah. Aqib's going to be fun, man. I'll tell you that. He'll probably be making a push. The whole no-fly zone will be making a push for him to make it. But there's going to be some more opportunities for the Broncos to have representation in Canton. And like we've said, Mace, no team has done it better than the Broncos in the past 5 years, getting 6 people in. It's finally starting to happen and really in full force.
Yep, let's keep that momentum. I mean, there's a lot of people involved with it, starting with Patrick Smythe, of course, over at the Broncos, and Jeff Legwold, who has dealt with a lot of criticism from fans, but has actually done a marvelous job in the selection room. And then, others of us who are kind of on the fringes helping causes. I mean, I'm still kind of humbled and flattered that Steve Atwater shouted me out last year when he was talking about being in the Hall of Fame. And we're gonna pick up the baton and we're gonna carry it for other guys. We're gonna push Randy Gradishar. We're gonna push Carl Mecklenburg. Provide a little extra push for DeMarcus Ware, and when Aqib's time comes, we're gonna push him as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say it's my Peyton Manning football on the live pods that really pushed Peyton Manning over the edge.
Yeah, now Peyton Manning's gonna start pushing Reggie Wayne. That's his next cause.
Yep, it absolutely is. Heck, maybe he's going to start pushing his good friend Brandon Stokely over the edge as well.
I don't think he can get him in the Hall of Fame, but as we saw briefly last night, tonight he did get him into a commercial. I think that was his
certainly did. It was Mace, man. What a fun Sunday morning live pod. Thank you all so much for joining us on the live part. If you tuned into the podcast, thank you so much as well. We will continue all of this Broncos talk, and man, maybe we'll find the next Peyton Manning in the next couple of weeks for the Denver Broncos, Mace. But for Andrew Mason, I'm Zac Stevens. Mace, go Bucks. We'll all be cheering for your Bucks. I hope that they can win. There we go.
Go Bucks. BUCCANEERS. Go Bucks.
We'll all be singing that tonight, Mace. Thank you so much for tuning in with us, guys. And go Bucks. We'll be back to break down the Super Bowl tomorrow. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the DNVR Broncos podcast.